Greetings, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to a Gender and Digital Life Toolkit for Educators webinar held by Common Sense Media. My name is Kelly Mendoza. I am Senior Manager of Professional Development at Common Sense, and we're so glad you're here participating and showing your interest in this new toolkit that we're offering. And the lessons in this toolkit are part of our larger K-12 digital literacy and citizenship curriculum. But we've pulled them out into a kit with some other resources that will be helpful for educators. So thanks for joining us. If you would like to ask a question, I think at the end, actually I can give you chat capabilities right now. If you'd like to chat during the session, let me go ahead and do that. And if you want to just state in the chat box, where you're from, if you're an educator, if you what your role is, then feel free to do that. And then in terms of participating in this webinar, you all have chat capabilities if you'd like to share that way. And then at the end, I'll answer any questions you may have. But let's go ahead and get started. So the goals of this webinar, I'm going to walk you through a quick background on gender and media issues as it relates to kids' lives. Then you'll be introduced to the Gender and Digital Life Toolkit, and we'll review some of the lessons and key concepts for different grade levels. And we'll talk about implementation ideas. So you may be coming to this already familiar with digital literacy and digital citizenship. Maybe you're already using our digital citizenship curriculum and wonder, well, what does gender have to do with this? So digital spaces, they can be inventive worlds where children, they stretch the limits of their imagination and identity. But online interactions and social behaviors often reflect and reinforce gender stereotypes and gender norms, or gender codes, as some people call them, acceptable expressions of masculinity and femininity that shape how young people develop their identity and influence their thinking about their roles and their opportunities in their lives. So the problem is that media popularizes a narrow definition of what it means to be a boy or a girl, and these narrow definitions can make their way into peer interactions online, and making it much harder for kids to keep perspective on media. They're sort of, as I'll talk about, they're not only consumers, but they're creators of these stereotypes. So gender norms play a really critical role in framing how kids and teens develop their identities online, express themselves on their social networking sites, through games or just hanging out. So it's not just an offline thing, that this is all being expressed online, since kids are living their lives out online. And in order to learn how to be responsible and respectful in terms of a good digital citizen, kids need to learn and develop an awareness about those unspoken rules and assumptions and stereotypes that inform their behavior. They really need critical thinking about what they're seeing and what they're creating as it relates to gender. So let me show you a couple studies on this topic. It's not surprising that young people would replicate the behaviors and assumptions in online spaces, despite conscientious attempts to raise awareness among girls about damaging beauty ideals or unrealistic thin ideal, for example, and among boys about the limits of the macho persona. Educators and teens say that the pervasiveness of mass media trumps these isolated efforts with their perpetuation of gender stereotypes. So recently we released a study, a survey of teachers, and we asked them about how they think entertainment media has influenced key aspects of their students' social development, and this is what we found. And the biggest problem that teachers identified actually was the media's impact on students' sexualization, as we have 67% of teachers say that entertainment media has had a negative effect on students in this regard, and including 26% who say very negative. And other aspects of students' social development that teachers think entertainment media are negatively affecting, including their ideas about relationships between boys and girls. As you can see, that's the 61% below that. And then body image is further down the list at 58%. So there's a lot of concerns. I'm guessing that if you're joining this webinar today, you're also concerned about these issues and are hoping, already educating students about it, or hoping to learn more. We also did some research from teens earlier this year, and we were looking at teens and how they felt about their social lives and their digital lives. And teens were surveyed about their digital lives, and we found differences in how boys and girls feel about their digital lives. So for instance, you can see the difference in between how many girls texted daily or boys texted or tweeted daily, those kinds of things. And we found that more girls are engaging in these sort of sharing behaviors, and that in this statistic, 57% of girls versus 28% of boys sometimes feel left out after seeing photos of others together online. And then 45% of girls and 24% of boys worry about other people posting ugly photos of them online. And I think that really is playing into a concern about maybe fitting into some sort of gender norm or gender stereotype and controlling their image online. So that's quite interesting. And you'll notice that, again, girls are engaging more in this behavior than boys, but boys are also participating too. So let's take a step back and just talk a little bit about gender and digital media, and then I will dive into the toolkit. So some people get concerned about confused about these terms, gender and sex. So let's just define gender, which is different from sex. So gender is about how a culture defines terms like masculine or feminine and everything in between. And it's about how people in a culture are socialized to think, act, and believe what men and women are and should be. It has to do with social identities and roles. And sex, on the other hand, is a matter of anatomy and biology. It's when you see a separate class of separated into boys and girls, you're separating them by sex, not by gender. So a fun fact would be, for instance, a lot of pregnant moms are having what they're calling gender reveal parties, where they reveal but they're actually revealing the sex of the baby. So shouldn't it be called sex reveal parties? Just kidding. But we thought that was kind of funny. Those terms are often misused. So what you'll be learning about, it's not gender literacy, it's gender and how it's associated with digital citizenship and digital literacy, just to make that clear. So this kind of work comes out of a long line of media literacy educators. Since the 1960s, media literacy, and before that even, media literacy has been one strategy to expose and combat gender biases in American culture. Jean Kilbourne, you may be familiar with her work, and Common Sense Media honored her at their yearly awards ceremony this year for her work in media literacy and gender. She was one of the first pioneers to really bring the relationship between media and public health issues to the forefront, and she sparked a movement that promoted media literacy as a way to prevent domestic violence, eating disorders, hypersexualization, and equal rights for women. And you may have heard of Killing Us Softly. She has a whole series of Killing Us Softly films. There's other filmmakers that do similar work too. Jackson Katz developed a film called Tough Guys about masculinity and male stereotypes in the media. So if you haven't seen sort of The Other Side, it's an excellent film. And you can find it through the Media Education Foundation. And just recently, earlier this year, Jen Siebel-Newsome released a film called Misrepresentation. And again, these are all media literacy attempts to critique mass media culture and gender stereotypes in that culture. However, the conversations and the resources for educators that are happening around media literacy and gender, they're still very much focused on traditional mass media and that model, critically analyzing advertisements, shows, films, and music. And this model is fine, but what's happening in a digital world, we know that kids are shifting from being consumers to creators. So as educators, we need to shift that too, because as we know, young people, they're not just consuming all of this imagery and these stereotypes and ideas about gender in the media, but they're creating them. And that's where this Gender Digital Life Toolkit is different, in that we're focusing a lot on both on the consuming and the creating. As most people are aware of, the media is filled with gender stereotypes about boys and girls and men and women, and kids' conceptions of men and women are influenced by everything that they see in the media. And in fact, kids are consuming 7.5 hours a day of media outside of school, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation in 2010. And that doesn't include texting or talking on their cell phone, but again, that's just a lot of, imagine all of the messages that they're getting in that 7.5 hours per day about gender. And especially when boys and girls, so that's more of the consumption side of it, but now we have kids creating and sharing. And when boys and girls start going through puberty, they're more sensitive and aware of the changes in their body, and they often start comparing themselves to the images they see in the media, or to other girls and boys that they see online. And not to mention, many of these images they're seeing, especially if it's more of a mass-mediated image, are perfected, they're airbrushed, they're photoshopped and unrealistic. And this kind of comparison is unhealthy, but we see it going on all the time. Girls sharing photos about their dieting and if they look okay, and what's happening is they're comparing themselves against this unrealistic ideal. So furthermore, they're seeing celebrities share images, and this influences their understanding of gender roles and norms. And it can also be very detrimental if they believe in stereotypes that are particularly harmful. So for instance, what you're seeing here is Miley Cyrus. This was a few years ago. She shared this photo got out. I think it leaked actually. But still, girls see this and they sort of want to mimic this sort of posturing in their own selfies, their self photos. There's Kim Kardashian in the middle. But on the left, you'll see Chris Brown. And this is interesting because you may have known that Chris Brown, he's a singer, a pop singer, entertainer, and a couple years ago, he basically was domestically violent against Rihanna, his girlfriend. So during that time, young girls were going on Twitter and basically saying, "I would let Chris Brown beat me up any day." Well, of course, that's particularly problematic that a girl would be up for. That they would think that that's okay, basically. And so not only through what kids are sharing in terms of photos, but in terms of their thinking about things. So, as educators, you can help break this cycle. And I think the cycle comes when we're getting kids to critically think about not only what they're consuming, but what they're creating and what they're sharing online. So, promoting good digital citizenship, it's a complex learning process. It requires more than a list of frowned upon behaviors. And creating online profiles, interpersonal communication, sexting, harassment, they're all rooted in ideas about gender norms. So for these reasons, Common Sense developed their Gender and Digital Life Toolkit. The toolkit was developed by educators, researchers, and cultural critics, and the lesson plans draw from real-world experiences to examine how gender codes are used and how they're recreated in the media. And the goal is to turn young people into active media critics and creators, and by extension into responsible and respectful digital media users. The curriculum is aligned to Common Core state standards and ISTE's NETs. And you'll see here it's made up of lessons, 2 in elementary, 3 in middle school, and 3 in high school. And there's also family tip sheets and teacher backgrounders for teachers to get a little more information about how to teach these topics. So let's actually dive into the toolkit at this point. So if you look at the bottom, there's the website. So bear with me while I bring that up. Okay, so you should be seeing, this is our main educator page. And commonsensemedia.org/educators. And if you look on the right, you'll see the curriculum toolkits icon. So we're going to click into that. And you'll see we have a few toolkits here. We'll click into the gender and digital life one. So what I wanted to show you is just sample one lesson from each grade level. So let's actually go into elementary and look at selling stereotypes. So you can view the lesson online. And if you're not aware, if you're familiar with our materials, and if you're not aware, on November 1st we launched a new scope and sequence. And in that we actually revised a lot of our lessons to make them easier to use based on all the feedback that we got from educators. So here's the lesson page for selling stereotypes. And in this lesson, you can see the essential question right here. How do we learn about stereotypes of boys and girls from media messages? So what students are doing in this lesson, and I'll get to it in a minute, is basically comparing and contrasting two websites from the same company, Lego. So before we dive into that, let me just show you where everything is on the lesson page if you're not familiar. You can use the lesson through an HTML version, which is here, and you can just go through the teaching plans that way. We have Teach 1, Teach 2, and then the closing that kind of leads you through the lesson plan. Or you can download the materials, and the lesson plan is here. But what's also in this one-click download, as I scroll down, so you have the lesson, but we also have the student handout that they will be using to compare the boys and girls websites, and the teacher backgrounder. So with each grade level, elementary, middle, and high school, there's a teacher backgrounder to brief you on the issues and just provide you a little bit more background context and help you with ideas on how to integrate it into your teaching. But in this lesson, let's first take a look at, excuse my extreme scrolling here, but let's take a look at the student handout. So one of the main activities is that students visit the Lego Friends website or the Lego Hero Factory website, and in groups they explore the website and they look at all of these things, the pictures, the videos, the style, the colors, etc. And they read the text. You know, the online website can be considered a text and gather evidence based on what they think might seem more like it's for girls or more like it's for boys. So they're gathering this evidence, and then they take a vote, and then they share out what their groups found. And so here are the websites that they're comparing. So Lego has actually divided their website for kids into two different sites, one basically for girls and for boys. Hero Factory, kids would be looking at Hero Factory, and they would also be looking at Lego Friends. So obviously this is the Lego site targeting girls. But you don't want to go into the lesson telling kids that. You're just having them explore and provide evidence based on what they think would be more for boys and for girls. And so this is a traditional media literacy activity, but it's also getting them to think about, wow, you know, some websites are designed to target girls or target boys, and is this okay, or, you know, why is this, and to explore it that way. So that's an example of an elementary school lesson, grades 3 to 5. In middle school, let's look at one of the middle school lessons. There's 3 lessons. Let's take a look at the reality of digital drama. So in this lesson, students are thinking about digital drama, and this is kind of a term, if you're a teacher, you've probably heard it, drama that's happening online or on Facebook. It's a term that middle and high schoolers use, and it's a good term to be aware of because sometimes it's sort of code for cyberbullying too, or sometimes it's more of just disagreements and that kind of thing, so something to be aware of. But in this lesson, the main activity is that students are, first they look at the video here on the right discussing digital drama. It's a focus group of middle school students talking about digital drama, things that are happening online, and how this might be different for boys or for girls. So they watch these real kids talking about their real lives, and then they actually watch this. You've all probably heard of the Real Housewives shows. Well, they watch a series of clips from the Real Housewives and explore how, based on that clip, digital drama is defined for men and for women. And in doing that, let's go ahead and download the lesson materials. In doing that, I'm going to scroll to the student handout. They are comparing. So they watch the video, the focus group video, or the kids discussing with one another. Then they watch Real Housewives, and this is in groups or in partners. And write their notes about what's different in both of those videos about how kids talk about online drama and how the reality TV stars talk about it. So that's sort of the main activity, and they're reflecting basically on how a lot of reality TV perpetuates stereotypes about drama and about how that plays out among boys and girls. And then also I just want to point out that with all of these lessons, on the right there's always, if there's a video associated with the lesson, it's always listed on the right. And then if there's family resources, that's also listed on the right. So you could click here and you'll see a family tip sheet on digital drama. What is it? Why does it matter? And then of course tips for parents. I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so I have a couple more minutes. Let me show you the one of the high school lessons. We have 3 lessons here. And one of them I'm going to show you is called Overexposed, Sexting and Relationships. So let's take a look at that one. So in this lesson, students learn about sexting and think about the risks and responsibilities when they share in a relationship, because we know from research that sexting is related to, in teens, is related to relationship building, that sometimes it's part of the relationship building process, that if you feel like you wanted to take it to the next level with your boyfriend or girlfriend, that you would share. But there's also, and by share I mean share a sext, like a photo or a semi-clothed or nude photo. But there's also pressure too that teens put on each other to share. So it's part of the relationship development process, whether or not in a healthy or unhealthy way, and it's also some teens report just sexting when they're bored or they just wanted to do something fun. So it's kind of that risk-taking component of teens. But in this lesson, they're really exploring the possible consequences, and so one of the main things they do, they watch this story about Allie's story, and she basically shared a nude photo with her boyfriend. They were very much in love. They broke up, and he shared it with everybody else, and it was really devastating to her. So she talks about that, and students reflect on that. And then later in the lesson, they basically, let me go to the handout. They basically simulate a conversation that they might be having via text. So I'm just scrolling to the student handout here. they read a story between two people in a relationship, and basically Jake is pressuring Shayla to share something. And so what they're doing is sort of finishing the conversation. How can Shayla continue the relationship but not share anything? What kinds of things could she say or do so she doesn't share, so she doesn't want to share, because it is risky, and once that photo is out there, it is out there and it can spread like wildfire. And I think, sometimes the problem comes, especially with girls, thinking that they're going to be in this relationship forever with their boyfriend. They're so much in love, and as we all know, sometimes with teen relationships that is, ends, unfortunately. So that's the example of the high school lesson. And then also I just wanted to point out a couple more things in the toolkit. So I showed you sort of the breakdown of lessons in the different grade levels. We have all of the resources for parents here in one place. We have additional articles too that you can share with parents, and a lot of schools do this. They have a parent page on their school website. They could share it that way, or through an e-newsletter, or if you have a parent night. Or it could basically mean, printing out a parent tip sheet and having students take it home. So there are a lot of ideas on how to get parents involved here. And then if you look at the bottom, you'll see just additional resources that we recommend. Misrepresentation, I mentioned that. Just a few additional resources, and then our content experts listed here as well. So that's in a nutshell, that's the toolkit. I also want to show you that is actually the toolkit lessons are part of our larger K-12 curriculum. So I'm going to visit our new scope and sequence, and you'll see that we have restructured this. If you haven't come to our site in a while, we've restructured the organization of the curriculum. But a lot of these lessons fall under self-image and identity. So for instance, if I were to click on, oops, it's not working, okay. Self-image and identity, the topic, all of those lessons, should pop up. One of them wasn't popping up. We're still working out the bugs. But you'll see the lessons pop up, and a lot of those gender and digital life lessons are under the topic self-image or digital footprint and reputation, or it could be under relationships and communication. But just know that this is a scope and sequence for our larger curriculum, and they are interwoven into the larger digital citizenship curriculum. So let me just go back to my presentation. Okay. I'm sure you're all coming from maybe different subject areas, or you may be at an elementary school where you're more of a classroom teacher. So these are just some ideas on connections. I think there's a lot of connections, particularly with English language arts and Common Core. So reading informational texts would be one Common Core skill, and gathering evidence, making an argument based on that. There's a lot of point of view in here. How might other people view this message? And speaking, listening, and collaboration skills, we have a lot of group work and discussion and speaking skills. If you're in social studies or civics or history, it might be interesting to look at gender and how it's related to race, class, and culture, and interwoven in that way. And how gender, you might want to consider, how might gender be viewed differently had there been social media at this point in history, and think about how it could have been different. Technology teachers, a lot of technology teachers focus on privacy or digital footprint, so those are good fit with the gender lessons. And then if you're a health and wellness teacher, obviously you probably are seeing some connections on gender and health issues with what you're doing. If you have questions, feel free to contact me directly. There's my email. But also, we have a couple minutes left. If you'd like to ask questions in the chat box, I'd be happy to answer them. And if not, this webinar is being recorded and it will be archived. So I'll get it up on our webinars page on the professional development page. And feel free to share with your colleagues or view again if this is something that you're interested in participating in the toolkit in your school. Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you so much for joining, everybody. I appreciate it. If you have any feedback, if you try out any of the lessons or are looking through things and have feedback, we would love to hear your feedback. We always do. We always really appreciate feedback from our educators who are using our materials. So again, thanks so much, everyone, for joining today. And visit the Gender Toolkit. Thank you.